All right, welcome back.
Good enough. My name is Miles Janess. I'm from Huntington, Vermont. I was born and raised there. Um, I come from a long line of carpenters, and so I grew up around it. Grew up in my dad's shop, and also in the woods, teaching myself how to use an axe. And when I was pretty young, just early 20s, I started working for a local company, restoration timber framing company called Building Heritage, with a friend and colleague of mine named Elliot Lothrop, who actually, one of the projects that I recently did with him is right here. That's one of my crew. Um, the So I did that for about 7 years, teaching myself a lot, coming up through the ranks there. I'm quite self-taught, and also done a fair amount of work with the Timber Framers Guild of America and TTRAG, the Traditional Timber Framers Research and Advisory Guild, which is about traditional preservation craft around timber framing. And then about 12 years ago, I started my own shop, which is called Vermont Heavy Timber, and we're based in Huntington, which is where our shop is. I employ 6 people right now. I started the business with a tractor and a used tractor and a used Wood-Mizer sawmill and about $5,000. Grown it to where it is today. We've been growing pretty steadily over the last 12 years. Right now we're about 1.3 million in business last year. We should do a fair amount more than that this year. I've, like I said, 6 employees. They make between 25 and 45 bucks an hour. And we are, as far as I know, one of the few, if not only, companies in the state who works there's a set of standards for preservation that's set forth by the Office of the Secretary of the Interior. So there's standards for preservation, standards for restoration, which are 2 different things. And we're one of the few, if not the only, companies that specializes in timber framing and works to those standards in Vermont that has approved. There's a couple other companies that do that work, but they're one-man shows. We often, like my colleague Elliot, we help them out in the energy projects. These standards are important for a few reasons. They maintain, our historic fabric, both here in Vermont and nationally. And as such, they are the standards that are mandated when projects are funded by grant funding, whether state or federal grant funds. So we do a lot of work for municipalities and some work for the state. And we do a lot of work in concert with NRCS and different other parts of the federal government, which give grant money to these projects. These days, we're focusing more and more on municipal projects, specifically covered bridges. We very much like to do work on trusses, which are wooden assemblies that create large spans. So covered bridges are some of our favorite things to work on. And so probably the preeminent covered bridge restoration company in the state. And also meeting houses. Right now, we're working on a pretty large restoration project on the South Hero Old White Meeting House. We just finished one in Ferrisburg last year, and also churches. And we do plenty of barns as well. We also jack and move buildings as kind of a sideline. We often have to do that work as part of our restoration work, just to be able to get to the broken bits of the timber frames that we work on. And so we have the equipment, the knowledge, and the insurance, which is very expensive. So we can make decent money moving other buildings around and, jacking them up in response to flooding events. So we do that, sort of fit those jobs in around the larger focus of the business. As I mentioned earlier, we have a sawmill. We are one of, I think, 2 sawmills in the state that can saw. We can saw 53 feet long. There's one other sawmill that can saw 50, 60 feet. So we sell specialty timbers to companies like ours, timber frame companies. We don't do a lot of selling boards and whatnot. It is something that I think I'd like to get into a little bit. but generally we are focusing on fairly niche projects. Our business has a pretty high barrier to entry, and I've been lucky enough not to have to compete in a marketplace against large businesses. We're doing pretty specialty work. So we saw almost all of our own timbers, about 90 to 95% of our timbers. We do buy some timbers occasionally from LSF Forest Products up in Jeffersonville. And they also will do custom planing for us. So we'll saw out all of our timbers, bring them up there, they'll plane them for us. That's when we're doing some new frames, which we do a couple new frames a year, generally only in the winter. Every spring, I'm immediately thinking, what are we going to do next winter? How am I going to keep the crew warm and happy? So we do some work outside, but I'm always trying to keep everybody inside in the winter, especially when it's 5 degrees outside. And they certainly appreciate it. I've been very lucky. Just a side about myself. I am very focused on traditional handwork, and I was lucky enough I've been lucky enough to work all over the world, and worked 3 years ago for almost a year. I was living in France, working on the restoration of Notre Dame Cathedral, and I've also worked in Estonia and Italy, castles and windmills and other projects like that, teaching and working. And Notre Dame was a really interesting project for me. I mean, that's obviously a really cool building, but for me, it was the thing that I'm proudest about that is it felt like a bit of a coup for handwork to be able to show people here to say, we can do this by hand, because there is a fair amount of work that we do by hand, according to the strictures that we work by. The restoration and preservation, we're replacing in kind. So when there's a hewn spruce timber in a covered bridge or a church that's rotten, we're replacing it with a hewn spruce timber. And a lot of people say, no, this just isn't feasible. It's not efficient. And I can say, well, if they did it here, on a project of this scale, we can do it anywhere. And it really is efficient. We are fast and can do a good job. I'm not saying we're faster than the sawmill, but John Henry has always been a leading light of mine. So we were given, we started out, we got a grant. We were given 2 years of technical assistance through the Vermont Housing Conservation Board, which has been really helpful. And we were partnered with 2 people from the UVM Forestry Extension and put together a business plan, have been working just on growth. We've never grown really for growth's sake. The employees are just the cornerstone of what we do. And it's a really technical trade. We don't really hire people who are just there to bang a hammer. The folks who work for me are really focused on being preservation timber framers. And so we grow when we have the people and the work, although I would say we've been very lucky to have steady work almost all the way through. I've never had to lay anyone from the product. So we started with that technical assistance grant, and through that, we applied for and received the grant, the Working Lands Grant. We were given $50,000 to build a drying shed. So this is building a 3-phase building that is a little over 100 feet long and 25 feet deep, with 2 50-foot bays, because obviously we use some pretty long timbers in our work. So we need to be able to store them. And one of the big bottlenecks in our work, because we do so much work in the winter, prepping for both new frames and for restoration projects that we have in summer. So we'll go to a project, we'll do all our measuring, we'll draw up our drawings in CAD, make all of our shop drawings, and then we'll cut them in the winter. So when we go, to use our summertime, we can be as efficient as possible. But we end up at the end of the winter, we have a massive amount of timbers and barely anywhere to put them. So that's been a big bottleneck for us. And so this grant, being able to build this building has been really helpful for us to grow. Because we have so much work, unfortunately, it's a funny place to be there. I would generally say most companies, construction companies, maybe any companies would say, I don't want competition. Well, for us, there's such a dearth of people in the trade. I would actually welcome competition. It's a shame because there's a lot of historic projects that just can't find people who can do the work, who can do it well, or even can do it up to the standard. And there are people who use, so there's, as you might know, there's a grant program that the state of Vermont puts out called the Vermont Barn Grant Program that gives, I think it's up to $50,000 matching funds. And there are projects that lose their funding because they can't find a qualified contractor, and we have to turn down projects pretty often. And it's a shame. It's really too bad. So I invite people to, we don't look at the people in our field as competition. We look at them as colleagues, and we're always interested in helping them. I'm very open with what I see as my colleagues about just about anything business. I share my numbers. I share how I do things. I love to see our trade grow as a whole, as opposed to just my business. I think we can all do well together. So because we're so busy, we are growing quite a bit right now. We're looking to hire another 3 to 4 carpenters and a project manager. So there'll be 10 to 11 employees, hopefully, by the end of the year. And I would say this grant has really helped us. Would we have done this project anyways? Yes, but over time, we want to do it right away. I'm not afraid of taking on some debt. We recently bought a couple of pieces of equipment that we've taken on a little bit of debt on, but generally, we've actually been really lucky. And for the last 5 or 6 years, we've had no debt at all. There's a huge amount of money that passes through the company, and there's also a fair amount that I put right back in the company. As long as I can eat and have over my head, pretty happy. So this grant has been really helpful for us. I appreciate the state of Vermont has been giving back. It's a little bit easier to pay my tax bill, or puts a smile on my face. I think that's it. There's probably more I could say, but
I'm just wondering, how does, so if you have 3 or 4 positions that you'd like to try and fill, what qualifications or experience does somebody need to actually get right in and contribute for you?
yeah, so teaching is a really big thing, just because there's such a dearth of people who do this work. And even with talented carpenters, even if we find a stick framer who's been doing it for 10 years or 15 or more, there's still a lot, the rigging, the jacking, the preservation work. It's just very specialized. And so no one comes to us knowing everything that they need to know. It depends right now, or in general, there's a certain amount of people who are fairly green that we can take on. And the more experienced people, the more green folks we can take on and teach. So right now we're looking for a couple folks who are not super experienced, and then maybe 3 folks who have quite a bit of experience, project leads, lead carpenters, but they can be more just stick framers, and we'll teach them the rest of it.
Representative Nelson?
Yeah, thank you. Do you do a lot of mortise and tenon, or are you plating?
Oh no, all Morrisontown.
All mortise and tenon, all by hand?
Yes. Yeah. Well, we have chain mortisers and stuff like that, but we can do it all by hand.
Yeah. You need to tap into the Amish.
They have such a good reputation, but I've also seen work that they do that's not that great. So it's hard to say. Yeah. If they're willing to ride their cart to my shop, I will hire them.
We have,
And there's a pretty good Mennonite community up by you, isn't there?
we have an Amish community that's really robust, and And, they can walk on a really pitched roof. I think in the snow, just like a mountain goat. They're pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And, you know, and that the barn raisins, of course, they build everything on 8s or 12s, you know, they said, why cut a timber if you don't need to?
Yeah.
But, no, that's a wonderful trade that you're into. It's an artwork.
Very lucky.
Who's in your bird?
What particular did you work on at the Notre Dame?
So we're working on the section of the roof called, or in the section of the cathedral called the nave. So that's the section in between the steeple and the bell towers, which is about 130 feet long. And there's the trusses are about a meter apart. They're very tight. Yeah, they're quite steep. It was like a 16 pitch or something. It's about 43 feet wide. Yeah, massive amount of yeah.
Can't you?
Yep, every single piece was hand hewn. If you go up there today, it's pretty hard to get up into the attic, but if you go up there today, besides the timbers looking new, you cannot tell the difference. I mean, we hewed just our part. I think we used 1,100 logs, French white oak logs. Yeah.
And you saw they get sawed down close, and then
For that, some of the work we did, we hewed from the round, and some was process they call mixed, which is where you saw just two faces, slightly oversized, and then you hew those two faces and then hew the two round faces. But as long as the trusses, if you think of looking at the truss this way, the members have to be straight in this direction. All the members have to be coplanar. But in this direction, they can bend quite a bit. So that's why we were just sawing in two planes so that the tie beams and whatnot can describe the arcs. And so we were actually hewing along with the grain lines, which keeps the structure in the timber.
Where's that Lipsky?
Thank you. Really impressive presentation. Following up on Representative Bird's question, I'm going to do a lot with LSF supplier.
Yeah.
But as you pointed out, old growth red spruce, aka Adirondack spruce, has a different, the rings are like the dollar bill now. They're
Yes, sir.
so, and I've been in Notre Dame long before it burned, and when it was all after it burned, but it was all sealed off. And I've been in the 4A to Soignier near Waterloo, where Maria Theresa planted white oak 450 years ago, and a ferocious European white oak.
Yeah.
It's not comparable to Hudson River Valley white or any of the North American white oaks. So
Dream to catch that.
how did you, when you sourced that white oak to replicate any sort of remnant of the grain pattern or growth ring pattern, was that a big challenge for sourcing that?
It was a pretty big challenge. I mean, the carpenters went out into the woods and selected single trees, and said, these are the ones we want. And it was pretty amazing, both the investment that the National Forest Program made and also private landowners, just for the honor of being able to say, these trees.
Like a church on
trees,
Church
exactly.
Street, 3 on Church
Pretty
Street.
cool. Exactly. Yeah, so the carpenters actually went out and they were looking not just for, the strength spec, but also specific curvatures to match what was there. And you remind me, sorry, I did miss this. As we very kind of sort of said, you could talk about the logs or something. So I did want to just say, depending on the year, 95 to 100% of what we use comes from Vermont. Almost all of our wood comes from Vermont. And the rare occasion that it doesn't is white oak, because it's pretty hard to find here. It's not very common. There are some patches, but sometimes, whether it's white oak or a different species, because we're often looking for really special trees, really big, perfect trees, I will get on the phone. I'll call every county forester in the state and every private forester I know. I've just got a list of foresters and loggers, And I just,
What species do you use? Spruce a lot or?
spruce is the most typical, is what most buildings, traditional buildings are made out here. Yes, sir. Yeah. Sometimes we see oak, it's not very common.
In parts of
We have seen some chestnut, but that's kind of hard to find at the size that we need.
Let's be clean.
Yeah, but actually, the last project I did overseas, I was working up in northeastern Italy, and we were working with chestnut. Yeah, it's beautiful. It's so cool. Yeah,
Really excited.
huge chestnut.
Congratulations.
Representative O'Brien?
That was sort of my question, just how you source things. Like if you find, a chestnut needs to be replaced here, you have to have a conversation about what's going to replace it or.
White oak generally, if we're replacing, hardwood like that, yeah. Or hardwood.
Every nice tree in the state, right?
But I've got my eye, yeah, I mean, I drive around and, I don't text while I drive, but I do, sir. Look at sagging roof lines and steeples that are leaning back and big trees.
That's unusual too, instead of a whole log load of something, right?
Absolutely.
If you just find one or two.
Sometimes that's exactly what we're doing. And logging, I mean, I do love working in the woods, and my foreman and I actually bought a skidder last year just because we love working in the woods, but I can't say it's the most profitable part of our business. And, but it's a hard one, but it's something we love to do. And it's also something that we have to do at times because, sometimes we're just looking for very specific things and we can't find a logger who's cutting that or a forester who's having a job done. And we might just find a landowner who has it. And the other thing is that with, the dearth of loggers, and also the dearth of sawmills, loggers and sawmills really have to rely on each other. And so we pay more, we'll pay 10% more, sometimes even more, just, and not even necessarily for the really perfect stuff. Sometimes we're just saying, okay, we need a whole bunch of pine in these lengths. And even though we're paying extra, the loggers, the sawmills that relationship to them is so important because we just can't do the volume. We are a specialty. We buy a fair amount of wood, but we're not LSF, or in any other big sawmill. And so they will sometimes turn us down, even though they'd be making a fair amount more for the wood, for a couple truckloads of wood. It's just not worth it to them because they have to maintain that relationship with the sawmill and vice versa.
Also, it's a Tucker.
I mean, they're great. Tucker's awesome. I love them. We've over time, it used to be that we would have bought more from Tucker, just because, I love the variety of what we do. And I also, I have a thing about if I can pay one of my crew to do instead of paying another company, well, great. I loved him that, but also, being that diversified has its own downsides, in terms of making money. So there are certain times when we would have bought a lot more from Tucker, and he's just been so far booked out. Although now that they were just, they're closing, I think they're finished with their expansion, which they got quite a grant from the Working Landscapes Board. So they might not have that 4 or 5 month waiting list that they have.
We need to transition to our last presentation, but are there any last quick questions?
Yeah, so you said you do use white pine.
Yes, sir.
And do you ever dismantle old structures for the timbers to catalog them?
No, it's very rare. I mean, I took down a barn in South Hero because it was cheap and I probably put it up for myself or something like that, but that's not, there's a couple of reasons why not, with that, replacing in kind or the strictures set forth by the Secretary of Interior's office, one of those are readable repairs. And so we're never hiding. We're never taking an old timber from somewhere else and putting it into an old barn, because that's sort of, conflating these two pieces of history, and we'd be confusing historians in the future. So we're doing our best to hew a replacement timber in that same style. And we might be such nerds that we might even look at the axe marks and say, well, hey, we got a whole wall full of axes. We're going to use that one because it matches. We can tell, what kind of axe that hewer was using. So no, we generally don't do that. There are some companies that take down barns and fix them up and turn them into great rooms for people. It's just not generally. We're busy enough doing the other thing. If we don't have to. Yes, sir.
Photos on your website of some of the European projects you've done?
There might be a couple. I don't, honestly, because that's not necessarily the business, I try not to advertise too much about, what I do as a person.
I want to see more pictures.
There's some, we have an Instagram account and there's some on there, stuff.
Instagram, thank you. We need to,
Thank you for your time.
I will say, thank you, fascinating, all of these presentations. We're here to better understand the program, but it's a wonderful side benefit that we get to hear all the stories, so.
Same thing. That's, some business. They're so freaking cool.
Let's have, Misha come right up then.
Representatives. I think in Europe, you should talk to the barrel makers. They're all looking for old oak, and the trucks coming from Eastern Europe are plentiful for French oak these days.
This is the one thing that I feel like I'm being gentrified out of my, now white oak's so expensive because the goddamn barrel.
Yeah.
All right, let's
Spain.
let's give our next witness the same amount of time that everyone else has had here, folks.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for having me here today. It's a pleasure to talk about a bit about our farm, Freeverse Farm. My name is Misha Johnson, and I run Freeverse Farm and Apothecary. We also run Freeverse Farm Shop in downtown Chelsea, and our farm is just a mile north of the village as well. We started our farm in 2012 in my hometown of Norwich, where we rented land for a couple of years before finding our own land in Chelsea. We grow about 100 different herbs, primarily to dry to make into spices, teas, tea blends, herbal remedies, herbal body care products. In addition to being a farmer, I myself am also a trained herbalist, and I also do the graphic design and photography for our business as well. So if you look on our Instagram or you look on our website, a lot of those things have been taken or designed by myself. We cultivate approximately 2 acres of herbs right now, and are in the process of scaling up our business to more like 3 or 4 acres of cultivated herbs. But we also do a lot of wildcrafting as well. So our land is about 38 acres, which is about half field, half forest. The open acreage, we also graze cattle in during the summer months, working with another farm on the other side of Chelsea to do so. They are American Milking Devons, which is a heritage breed. They're a multi-purpose breed, but they're raised for meat purposes. The herd is an integral part of our wild harvesting as well. So we can harvest ahead of the herd before the herd is grazed through certain areas. So we'll harvest things like red clover, which we all love as Vermonters, of course, but it's also a wonderful medicinal herb. That we also will harvest St. John's wort, yarrow, red raspberry leaf. And then there's plenty of trees and shrubs that we can harvest from as well. So things like linden or basswood, as well as elderberries. And I could keep going on about all the wonderful herbs that grow wild in Vermont. We will harvest everything from blossoms like the red clover I mentioned. We also harvest calendula, chamomile. We can harvest the aerial parts of the crop. So that's the above ground part, the leaves and flowers. So that might be spearmint or oregano or thyme, something like that. We can harvest the bark, things like cherry, and also the roots of things like burdock, dandelion, marshmallow, and plenty of others. We got our grant from Working Lands for scaling up our aerial production of crops. So as I mentioned, the oregano, spearmint, things like that. The list goes on with the number of herbs that we grow that we can use it for. And primarily, we're looking to find ways to make our production more efficient. So, for example, with a 100-foot bed of any given herb that we harvest the aerials of, like oregano, as an example, it might take us about 3 or 4 man hours to harvest that by hand and bring it into our herb drying barn to dry. But with the harvester that we got, which is a TerraTech, what's called baby leaf harvester. TerraTech is a French company. That machine allows us to harvest in 10 or 15 minutes, that same amount that would take, as I said, 3 or 4 hours. So the amount of efficiency that we can achieve with it is really dramatic. And it benefits not only efficiency of our farm, but also the backs of our employees, and allows us to spend time doing other things like just making sure that the herbs are clean, that they are high quality, so that we can continue to scale up while maintaining the quality of our herbs. The herbal marketplace, as you may know, has been globalized like so many other things, and herbs is sort of an unmet need, especially locally. We've found since we started our farm that there's just a dramatic increase in demand for local herbs that's unmet. And there are other herb farms popping up around the state that are also producing really high quality products. And we are pleased to be a part of that growing demand in the state. So we can provide bulk herbs as well as the herbs for our own products that we make too. And we sell locally in our shop, Reavers Farm Shop, through our website. We sell to people both locally and around the country. And then we also sell wholesale, direct wholesale. Claire mentioned Fair, which is a marketplace that we use, as well as Mabel. It's another online wholesale marketplace. And we also work with Food Connects, the nonprofit food distributor, as well as the Acorn Food Hub to distribute our products. And then one of the things that's really beneficial about us scaling up our production and having this efficient harvester is that we can meet the demands for larger buyers. So for example, this past year, we've been able to work with Vermont Bean Crafters to provide parsley for their bean products, like their bean burgers and things like that they produce. And they've been trying to find, like Claire, a lot of local sources for their ingredients. And we feel that we can meet that demand as we continue to scale up. To tell you a little bit more about the harvester, I wish I had brought some photos for you, but I neglected to do so. I apologize for that. But if you look up the TerraTech website, you'll find some photos and videos. It's spelled TerraTech. And if you look at the baby leaf harvester, there's a couple YouTube videos and photos of the machine there. Unfortunately, we don't have any photos of it on our website.
I think there is a photo in the impact report.
Okay. So the machine is about as wide as this table here, and it's electrically powered. There's a cutter bar at the front end that cuts the crop. There's a reel that knocks the herb onto a conveyor belt that brings the herb up into a tote. Yeah, there you go. There's a photo of me doing it.
Very last thing.
Yeah.
Good.
So here's the bringing up the herb, and there's a blue tote. You can just see the end of there. And so this is me actually doing our first harvest ever with this last late July, I think it was. And this is a skullcap medicinal herb that we love to grow. And what's great is that as you can see, the wheelbase straddles the width of our beds and allows us to very quickly and efficiently just run down the length of the bed, harvesting the crop. And probably at least maybe 50% of the crops that we grow can be used with this. We can't use it for, I mentioned, the blossom crops, which all have to be done by hand. But it's one of the most important types of ingredients that we use for our spices and teas and bulk herbs that we offer.
Is it like one of these things?
No.
That's it.
Yeah.
It's in the last page of your illustration.
But there is a video on their other website, as I mentioned. And it's self-propelled as well. As I mentioned, it's electric, so it's pretty quiet, no fumes, anything like that. It's always been our goal to do as much by hand as possible, or just to have humans on the ground looking at the herbs. And that's how we feel we can maintain the quality of our products. And this machine allows us to do it. As you can see, I can walk behind it and I can watch each stem come up into the tote. And we always go through and check the herb before we harvest. And then we bring the herbs into our drying barn, which we completed in 2022, which is a solar powered drying barn. We have these trays that are, again, about the width of this table. They're 4 feet by 4 feet with basically window screen on them. And we spread the herbs out and we stir them once or twice a day. And usually the herb can dry in 2 to 3 days. So if we harvest, say, 100 pounds of herb, oftentimes that'll dry down once it's fully processed to about 10 pounds of herb if we're talking about a leaf crop. So we get about 10% from that large 100-pound volume. For some of the blossoms, because we're not processing away any of the stems or other parts of the plant, it's maybe more like we get 25% of that original harvest weight. Yeah, let me see if there's anything else to mention. Did you have a question? Yeah.
Yeah, your TerraTech, that would also have other applications. Would it like work for harvesting lettuce or spinach?
Yeah, it would. And they actually have they have two different models that they offer. One is more commonly used for things like spinach or lettuce mixes, like we're talking about. This one has a stronger blade and a stronger motor so that it can cut through woodier stems, which we have with a lot of the herbs that we grow. So you may have seen like smaller scale veggie growers that do use something like this. But this works really well for our herbs, which, as I said, have a woodier stem. They're trickier to cut.
Would you ever think of diversifying more? You know, I mean, the herbs, wonderful, fantastic. There's a market for it. That's great. But would you ever consider if you wanted to put more land in, go into like a leafy vegetable crop as well?
Yeah, we've thought about it. I think the thing holding us back is just a total change in our workflow and how we operate. With drying herbs, we're going out on a sunny day, harvesting the herb, bringing it in. There's no washing needed. It can go right in the dryer and get dried in a few days, and then it gets packed, bagged up, and it can go into storage. With the leafy crops, then we have to get it fresh to market or fresh to a store or something like that. So we'd be open to it, especially starting out with selling to our store in the village. But yeah, for now we're focusing on the herbs.
And do you do anything with ginseng?
Yeah, so I mentioned our woodland, and so we have done some work with establishing some woodland medicinals like ginseng. Those take, as you probably know, like many years before they're ready to harvest. So we're not there yet for harvesting from those crops, but that is a dream of ours to do that.
And you've never gone out mountain climbing looking for it? I've always wanted to go look for ginseng. I've never.
Yeah. I've looked around in various woods that I've enjoyed hiking through, but I haven't really come upon like a big patch of it. Although I have heard that Chelsea and Orange County has some of the best soils for growing those woodland medicinals like ginseng around, because we have a great hardwood forest in our area.
I know at the market here in Vermont, every now and then someone has some pretty good substantial ginseng,
Yeah.
a wild ginseng.
They foraged. Yeah, Elizabeth?
Yeah, no, I just also wanted to call out that, I think one of the important aspects of, one of the things we wanted to feature was just the diversity of the business enhancement grant. And I think it is important to name that this was like a $13,800, $900 grant. So one of our smaller grant awards from a dollar perspective, but that did end up having significant impact for the business. And I think what's important to say out loud is that the board is conscious of making investments that are impactful for the scale of the business, right? So, and that's how smaller farms and smaller operations end up being included in the grants. I think and that's part of what we're trying to capture here today is, this is, I think when we are talking about pure dollars and number of, working lands, businesses impacted, like the story of Butterfly Bakery is really compelling. But when we're talking about a $13,000 investment and like what it, the efficiency that it has added to this farm's production and like worker well-being and, ability to scale, it was still very meaningful and obviously compelling to the reviewers. So just wanted to like spell that out. It might have been clear to everyone already, but
It's a great story, all the diversity of our agriculture in this state and the working lands, and it's all fabric of what we are, and I really appreciate what you do. And to hear you talk about it, and I've heard about these things, I've never worked with them or tried them, but
When did you acquire?
I think it was late July of last year, so we haven't had a full season yet to use it.
Yeah,
And our goal is to scale up. We've roughly been producing around 800 pounds of dried herbs a year. And our goal is to scale up to close to 2,000 pounds in the next, say, 5 years or so.
I think to Elizabeth's point, the committee is, interested in better understanding the impact in ways that can be measured.
Yeah.
Over time. And so at some point, perhaps you'll be hearing from the Working Lands staff to try and collect some information on, how did you actually end up doing in terms of your, ability to meet those goals?
Yeah, I mean, already it's even just using it that one time, like you can see in that photo, everybody on our crew was just blown away with just how quick it was. And everybody was able to just kind of do other things while I was standing there doing the harvest. So I think everybody is excited about the opportunity it provides.
Well, somebody was talking about work-life balance earlier, and if you can continue to do what you're doing and also have a little more time to do the rest of the things that we all like to do in life, there's a benefit to that maybe isn't as easy to measure, but good to know about. Yeah. Representative Burke, I think, and then.
I just wanted to point out an observation this is also preserving an art. You're all preserving an art in the midst of creating a business around it. Like that's just really special, so there's a lot to be said just about that. That might not have a dollar value on, but it does, because there's value that surrounds the art that you're involved with. So it's like, very, very niche things that require not only you can't just come into any of these businesses. There's a lot of learned knowledge that you all house within your businesses. So that's invaluable to our state. So
Feels like part of what Vermont's about anyway.
Right.
Is working, actually being a part of the thing,
yes.
not just running a show somewhere.
Representative Lipsky, did you
Thank you, Chairman. Do I pronounce him Misha?
Misha.
Misha.
Yeah.
Yeah, every one of these, the diversity of the presentations, Elizabeth, is really great. But the medicinal, we've heard of big pharma, they're in the news, they control world health, supposedly destroy world health. But what you're doing is 40,000, 20,000, 10,000 years old, and you are bringing to the 21st century some of the wisdom and growing. That was really impressive. And just whether it's viticulture or, herbs and medicines to, so it's curious, on maybe an acre and a half or 2 acres, can you be a netting business that has employees, just with the rarity and the care that put into these 800 pounds of product?
Yeah,
annual production.
Yeah, we hire a few folks every summer to help us on the farm. I think overall we have maybe 6 or 8 people that work with us between our various ventures with our shop and apothecary and farm. And we hire on often people who have farming experience, but also just herbalists who are interested in herbs and working more intimately with the plants, because a lot of herbalists get trained just on dried herbal products or a bottle of a tincture or something like that. And we find that people come to us, whether it's who studied at BCIH or other herb schools in the region. They bring a certain passion that helps us bring that quality to the products that we produce. And a lot of people, herbalists, will buy, whether it's a home herbalist or somebody doing another herbal business or a food business, they want to use really high quality herbs for their products. And so we're happy to support them and like to see what kinds of things that they create with our stuff.
Elizabeth?
No, it's interesting. I just want to share actually. In 1 minute, 1 minute. my own sort of rationale, or I should say our own rationale in the selection of because I think it's interesting, like I didn't actually, like your point is very interesting to me and I hadn't absorbed that previously, but like for us, for the board, the like wine production or, vineyards, it's like, my understanding is that we're at a very sensitive moment where there's a lot of opportunity for growth, but there's also a lot of challenges. And we haven't ever had we have had other working lands investments in vineyards, but we've never invited a grantee to come and speak. So like, I think that was the perspective from which I reached out to David. And then for Claire, it really is like thinking about how investments can have this supply chain impact, can benefit multiple working lands businesses. The map isn't up, but that's a great image of that. And then I think for Freeverse, we were thinking a lot of like, yeah, the larger dollar investments are great. And we do support larger farms, but I think it also felt important to say, and we also make small dollar investments in smaller operations, and that was, Freeverse was exemplary of that. And then of course, for the forest industry, what the board has talked quite a bit about is they're always very interested in investing in the primary forestry, so investing directly in logging and sawmill operations, or logging operations, I guess sawmills would still be secondary. But I think for what I hear the board thinking about a lot is how important it is to invest in businesses that are making those primary businesses more viable. And timber framing, and I think, and I think timber framing, and not even just to the level at which Vermont Heavy Timber is working on the preservation front, but timber framing in general is something that the board thinks a lot about as having significant consumption and, market for like Vermont loggers who are struggling.
Has been.
And has been for decades, but really has become sort of a trademark for the state in some ways, like people recognize the craftsmanship of timber framing in Vermont, and I think the demand is steady. So I just thought it was helpful to say out loud what my
Great.
thinking was. Yeah.
The diversity.
And I will say that there are also other grantee stories in the impact report, in addition to the grantees that we highlighted during the hearing yesterday.
I think we got time for one more. John?
Just a question, to follow up on what you're speaking about, Elizabeth, how is it the applicant who comes up with this sort of dollar amount that they
Yes.
need? Is there any sort of coaching or saying like, because you could have asked for 50,000, right? I'm sure all farmers could use, money, but so how do you, land on like, this is going to be impactful? It's really up to the applicant to get that dollar number, that if I get this grant, it's going to be impactful on a specific farm or forest operation.
Yeah, that's right. So it is up to the applicant to explain how the project is going to be impactful and spell out those impacts. And I think what's really important though is to say that, the board is looking for investments that are impactful in relationship to the size of the business, but the investment should also be in relationship to the size of the impacts. If that makes sense.
Right, like David could have done half that and maybe that would be impactful, but like, how do you decide on the 5.2 acres? Yeah.
Right. And the result of the $50,000 exponentially increases what our production will be. Every dollar.
I would say that there are quite a few I know that reviewers look quite closely and it's always discussed in reviewer conversations. If there's ever an ask, for example, that's more than the sales of the business, which happens sometimes, and sometimes there's a strong rationale for it, but oftentimes there's not. So, and we also guide people to ask for the minimum, right, in the RFA, and that's just because of the demand and the dollars available. So we say, you know, if you can put, you know, matching funds in, or if you can, you know, take out a loan for half the project, like that's encouraged, like that's what we're saying when we say in the, because there's like an application guide, we encourage people to ask for, you know, really what's needed. And obviously there's room for interpretation. Different applicants will interpret that differently, but we name it.
We have, thank you very much. Great presentations. The stories have swept us all away. We're here to learn more about the Vermont landscape and how it's managed. And we're also trying to sort out lots of budget requests. And we will be talking more about this at some point. We've been asked to give some time to I always get mixed up, the board.
The Working Lands Coalition.
The coalition, thank you, okay, which is just spoiler alert, is going to be coming in suggesting that we appropriate more funding than the 1 million that's in the request that's come from the budget.
Who's in that coalition?
I'm not even going to try and,
Okay.
we'll hear about the list when they come in, I guess, but it's familiar names and faces. And if the committee has thoughts on what we think it might be helpful to learn in addition to what we've already learned. So I know we've talked about, you know, what do we know about outcomes, about return on investment and so forth. I think that we can be thinking about that. We can share that either directly or indirectly through the coalition, those requests to the agency, and then they can help pull together data that we might not have already seen. Do you want to say anything about that?
No, I think that I was wondering if, based on the conversation yesterday, and I don't think I think there's sort of two separate things. There's the budget ask that might, it sounds like, be coming from the coalition, and they did share that with us. Like, we know that what their ask is going to be. But it is important to name that it's the board and the coalition are two very separate entities. So I think if there's data that would be helpful around helping to assess need, like, we can definitely provide data. And then I think on the other hand, which doesn't have to be tied, I think, so strictly to the budget conversation for this year, but is just offering some partnership around introducing the data, our new data collection plan, getting feedback, like if there's anything missing. Like, I was thinking we could share, because I mentioned yesterday that we put some significant work into improving our data collection, which is coming into effect this year. So feedback this year would actually be very timely if there's something we want to add.
Good. And that, when you say this year, could that be like in March, say, or is it more time sensitive?
So the grants themselves won't close until the summer.
Ah.
So that's when the data will be collected. That makes sense. Like, we put it into effect this year, so the final reports, your grant is closed, isn't it? Is your grant
Not quite close, no.
Somebody, I thought you had closed. So you completed, for example, the new final report, which is getting to, because you're always able to, if you're done, you can close your grant early, right? So that's why the grant was closed out early. The outcomes were achieved, and so, you know, we don't need to sit on your remaining grant dollars, we close it out. But in this new final report, we are collecting the data that I think the committee is interested in, which is like number of jobs created, and then the grantee's own assessment around those jobs created, to what extent are they due to the grant? And then it's the same question for increased sales, increased productivity, increased acreage and increased acres in production, worker well-being, labor efficiency, and equity impacts. So
Matching.
Yeah.
Dollars.
the matching dollars.
Matching dollars, so if you get
collected.
if you're buying a $80,000 piece of equipment and you get a grant for 50, you're throwing in a $30,000 match. So I mean, whatnot.
The matching data we can, we shared, we maybe didn't share the match specifically for FY 25, which we could share. We shared the dollars leveraged from the beginning of the program, which was like the 31.9
Yeah,
million. Right now, it's more or less for every dollar the state's invested, there's a dollar leverage from other funding sources. But that's data that we definitely have and, can.
Well, good. We can, you and I can talk more about that
Okay.
offline, but I think that that's a good idea.
And then we can talk, we can talk a little bit more about specific,
Great. Good. All right. Well, thanks again, everybody. Appreciate your time. We have one more thing to do as a committee before we break.
Are these?
Okay.
It was.
No, I just didn't want to leave it if it's not.
just for.
Yeah, it's better.
Yeah, just on